I probably shouldn't have gone to that party. That's the thought that kept looping in my head the night everything changed, when I saw something I wasn't supposed to see and learned something I could never unsee. But if I'm being honest, I don't regret it. Not even a little. Let me back up. My name's Dylan. I'm a senior in college, and for most of that time, my best friend has been Eli. We met freshman year. He's the loud, chaotic type, always dragging me into some new plan or mess, and I'm the more reserved one, happiest with a controller in my hands and a quiet night in. Somehow, it works. Eli's got a younger brother, Nate, a year younger than us and, as far as I could tell for the longest time, just the typical hot jock type you'd see on a poster for the campus gym. Tall, tan, always in workout gear. He played soccer, dated girls, and didn't talk much. At least not to me. To be fair, I didn't pay him much attention, at least not out loud. Anyway, fast forward to mid-semester. Eli's throwing one of his infamous apartment parties and ropes me into helping. I show up early with snacks and a six-pack, thinking I'll help set up, hang for a bit, and dip out early before the chaos sets in. Typical plan. What I didn't plan on was Nate being there early too. Shirtless, barefoot, and clearly just out of the shower, hair damp and curling at the edges. "Hey," he said, nodding casually like he wasn't half naked and dripping in the living room. Hey," I stammered, trying not to stare and immediately failing. He smirked like he knew exactly what he was doing, then walked past me, the scent of whatever cologne he wore hitting me like a truck. I tried to focus on unpacking the snacks, but I could still feel the heat on my face. The party started slow, like they always do. People trickled in. Music got louder. Drinks started flowing. I ended up on the couch between Eli and two girls from our psych class, trying to have a conversation while also keeping tabs on how many drinks I'd had. It was Nate who handed me the fourth one. I hadn't even asked for it. "Thought you might need another," he said, eyes locked on mine as he passed me the cup. "Thanks," I said, confused. Was he flirting? No. Couldn't be. He was straight. Eli's brother. Off limits in every way. Still, he sat down next to me. Too close. His leg pressed against mine and didn't move. "Crowded," he said, shrugging. I nodded, even though there was literally a foot of space to his left. But I didn't move either. The night wore on, and eventually the party started winding down. Eli had disappeared with someone from his chem lab, and people were either passed out or calling rides. I was debating whether I should crash on the couch or try to Uber home when Nate plopped down next to me again, this time with a fresh beer in hand. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, a little hoarse. "Just thinking of heading out." "You should stay," I blinked at him. "Why?" he shrugged. "You've been drinking. Be safer." Again, his leg pressed against mine. Again, he didn't move. "You can take my bed," he offered, like it was no big deal. "You're not sleeping?" "I'll crash on the couch." I should have said no. I should have just called the Uber and gone home. But instead, I nodded. "All right, thanks." He led me down the hall, past the chaos of Eli's room, and opened the door to his. It smelled like him. Clean, with a hint of something woodsy. His room was neat, a little impersonal, but the bed looked like heaven. "I'll get you a shirt," he said, rifling through a drawer. "I'm good," I said, kicking off my shoes. He turned and handed me one anyway, just in case. Then he paused in the doorway. "You sure you're okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, thanks again." He stood there for a second too long. "All right. Night, Dylan." "Night, Nate." The door clicked shut, and I stood there alone in his room, holding his shirt in my hands. It would have ended there. Should have ended there. But it didn't. Because maybe 10 minutes later, I woke up to the sound of the door creaking open, and Nate stepping inside. The room was dark except for the faint glow of streetlight bleeding in through the blinds. I blinked, half asleep, trying to make sense of the sound I just heard. That's when I saw him, Nate, silhouetted in the doorway. He stepped in slowly, quietly, like he wasn't sure he should be there. I sat up slightly, squinting. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice still thick with sleep. He didn't answer right away. just shut the door behind him and leaned against it for a second, like he was weighing something heavy. Then he walked toward the bed. "I couldn't sleep," he said. Sorry if this is weird. I opened my mouth to say something, but nothing came out. He stood at the edge of the bed for a second, then sat down next to me, not on the far side, right beside me. The mattress dipped under his weight, and I was suddenly hyper-aware of how close we were. His bare arm brushed mine. "You okay?" I asked again, softer this time. He nodded, staring ahead at the wall. "Yeah, just too quiet out there. I don't know." I waited for him to say more, but he didn't. Just sat there. Then he turned to look at me, and that's when it happened. He reached out and touched my hand. Barely. Just the tips of his fingers, tracing across my knuckles like he wasn't sure he was allowed to. His touch was hesitant, but deliberate. I froze. "Dylan," he said, and his voice cracked just a little. "Can I ask you something?" My heart pounded in my chest. "Yeah, of course." He took a breath, looked down at our hands, then back up at me. "Have you ever thought about me? Like, in a different way?" The question hit like a punch to the gut. I started, then stopped. I couldn't lie, not with his hand still resting against mine. "Yeah," I admitted. "I have." He didn't move away, didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned in just a little, eyes flicking down to my mouth. "I'm not drunk," he said quickly. "I didn't want you to think this was like some messed up party thing. I've been thinking about it. For a while, I didn't know what to say." Here was Nate. Eli's brother, the guy I'd always filed away as strictly off limits, looking at me like I was the only thing in the world that made sense. And then he kissed me. It wasn't rushed or sloppy, just a soft, cautious press of his lips against mine, testing the waters, waiting to see if I'd pull back. I didn't. When he leaned back, his face was unreadable. "Sorry," he muttered. "I shouldn't have done that." I kissed him again, this time slower. Intentional. Like I was making it clear I wanted this just as much. When we pulled apart, he let out a shaky breath. "Okay," he whispered, half laughing. "Okay." Then he slid under the covers beside me. We didn't do anything else that night. Just lay there, facing each other, hands tangled between us. I could feel his heartbeat against mine. Steady, calm, real. And before I drifted off, he whispered, "Don't tell Eli." I smiled in the dark. Not yet. Waking up the next morning was like stepping into someone else's life. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, lighting up the room in soft gold. I blinked against the brightness, groggy, trying to piece together where I was. Then I remembered. Nate. His arm was still draped over my waist, his chest warm against my back. At some point in the night, we'd ended up like that, close, entangled, like we did this every night. And I hadn't moved. Not once. I lay still, not wanting to break the moment. But I could feel my brain slowly kicking into gear, tugging at the edges of the fantasy. What the hell happens now? As if he could hear my thoughts, Nate stirred behind me. I felt the shift in his breathing, the slow realization as he woke up. He didn't move his arm, he didn't speak, but I could feel it. The hesitation. "Morning," I finally said, my voice low. "Hey," he murmured. A beat of silence. Then, slowly, he pulled back, his arm slipping away. I turned around to face him, and we just looked at each other for a second. He looked uncertain, tired. Like the weight of what happened was just starting to settle in. "Regret it?" I asked before I could stop myself. His eyes snapped to mine. "No," he said quickly. "No, that's not." He ran a hand through his hair. I don't know what this means yet." I nodded. I got it. Really, I did. But there was still that knot in my chest. We both sat up, the bed creaking under us. Eli's gonna freak, he muttered, almost to himself. I glanced at the door. We don't have to tell him. Ever? Not yet, I corrected. Let's just figure it out first. You and me. He nodded slowly. Yeah. Okay. We left the room a few minutes later, one at a time, like criminals sneaking out of a crime scene. Eli was still asleep, thank God. I made coffee while Nate disappeared into the bathroom. Everything was so normal it felt fake. By the time Eli finally emerged, groggy and scratching his head, I was halfway through my second cup. "Mornin', nerds," he mumbled, grabbing a mug. "Mornin'," I echoed, trying to sound normal. Nate played it cool too, which was both impressive and terrifying. I kept waiting for him to slip up, accidentally glance at me too long, say something that sounded different, but he didn't. It was like nothing had happened. Except everything had. The rest of the day passed in a weird haze. People from the party came and went, cleaning up, gossiping, laughing. I went through the motions, small talk, helping with trash, scrolling my phone too much. But every time I passed Nate, our eyes would meet. And it was there. Something new. Quiet. Unspoken. That night, when I finally got home, I lay in my own bed staring at the ceiling. Everything felt too still, too empty. I picked up my phone and texted him, "You okay?" The typing bubble popped up instantly. "Yeah, just thinking about you." My heart did something stupid in my chest. "Me too," I replied. He sent a heart emoji. Just one. No words. I stared at it for a long time before setting my phone on my chest, closing my eyes, and letting it all hit me. I kissed Nate. He kissed me back. And we were just getting started. The next week was hell in the most confusing way possible. On the outside, everything looked the same. I still went to class, still worked on my thesis, still met Eli at our usual diner to complain about professors and campus Wi-Fi. But under all that, something had shifted. Every time I saw Nate, it felt like the room got 10 degrees warmer. The texts never stopped. Late-night chats turned into middle-of-the-day check-ins. Memes, song lyrics, random photos of his dog. He sent it all, and I caught myself smiling like an idiot every single time. But we hadn't talked about it. That night. The kiss. The way we'd curled into each other like we'd been doing it for years. Until the following Saturday. Eli had invited me over again. Game night, just the usual group. Cards, beer, trash talk. But when I got there, Nate opened the door, and he looked nervous. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Hey." He stepped aside to let me in. As I brushed past him, our arms touched, and I swear it was like static. Every hair on my body stood up. The place was packed. Eli was already setting up the table, talking shit to anyone within earshot. The rest of the group was loud, laughing, cracking jokes. I slipped into my usual seat, trying to stay casual, but I could feel Nate's presence across the table. His eyes on me. His leg bumping mine under the table just slightly, just enough that no one would notice. I thought I was imagining it. Until I looked up, and he was smirking. The bastard was doing it on purpose. We didn't talk much that night. Couldn't, really. Too many people, too many distractions. But around midnight, when the others started to peel off, Nate disappeared down the hall. A minute later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Bathroom. Now, I blinked. Glanced up to see Eli distracted, arguing over whether he had cheated at Uno. I slipped away. When I stepped into the hallway bathroom and closed the door behind me, Nate was leaning against the sink, arms crossed, looking entirely too good in a hoodie and sweatpants. "You came," he said, smirking. "You texted," he shrugged. Still. Silence fell between us. Not awkward. Charged. Like the last thread of patience was pulling tighter and tighter between us. "So what is this?" I asked finally. "You flirting in front of people now?" He stepped closer, closing the gap. "That wasn't flirting." I raised an eyebrow. "No? That," he said, voice dropping, "was me trying not to grab you in front of my brother." He kissed me before I could reply. Harder this time. Hungrier. It wasn't sweet like the first kiss. It was months of quiet tension and looks across rooms and texting until 2 a.m. spilling over all at once. When we pulled apart, we were both breathing harder than we should have been for standing in a bathroom. "We should probably go," I said, barely able to form words. "Yeah," he said, licking his lips. "You go first." So I did. I walked out, sat back down at the table, pretended I hadn't just made out with Eli's little brother in the guest bathroom. 10 minutes later, Nate walked out like nothing had happened. He didn't look at me, but when he passed behind my chair, he let his hand rest on my shoulder. Just for a second. Just long enough. After that night, everything became harder to ignore. We weren't just sneaking glances anymore. There was something there. Something real. Something neither of us could keep shoving down between text messages and brushed shoulders. It was the kind of thing that didn't need to be talked about to exist. It just did. But we still weren't talking about it. Until the night Nate asked me to come over, alone. He said Eli was out with friends, wouldn't be back till late. Just come hang, he'd texted like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. When I got there, he opened the door like he'd been waiting. No small talk. No games. Just grabbed me by the hoodie, pulled me inside, and shut the door with a quiet click. We didn't speak for the first few seconds. Just looked at each other. Then I said, "So is this a thing now?" He took a deep breath. "I don't know what to call it. But yeah, it's something." That was all I needed. He led me to his room, the same room where everything had started. The bed was made this time. A lamp glowed soft yellow from the corner. He sat down first, patting the spot beside him. I joined him, our thighs touching. "You've been in my head," he said. "Every damn day." "Same," I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. He looked over at me. "I don't know where this goes, but I know I want it." His hand found mine. And this time, we didn't just kiss like we were stealing it. We kissed like we had time, like we wanted to feel every second of it. His fingers laced with mine, tugging me closer. I felt him exhale when our foreheads touched. "I'm not good at this," he said softly. "At what?" "Letting people in." "You just did." He smiled. Just a little. Then he pulled me into another kiss. Slower this time, like he was trying to memorize what I tasted like. We didn't rush anything. We didn't need to. The room was quiet, the world outside irrelevant. At one point, he laid back on the bed and pulled me with him, our legs tangled. His hand slid up under my shirt, just resting there against my skin, warm and solid. We talked in between kisses. About school. About how Eli would murder both of us if he ever found out. About how confusing this all was, but also how good it felt. And then he said something I wasn't expecting. "I used to think I wasn't allowed to want this," he whispered, tracing lazy circles on my side. "But when I'm around you, it's the only thing that feels right." I didn't know what to say, so I kissed him again. Not to avoid the moment, but to let him know I felt the exact same way. Waking up in Nate's bed was a different kind of surreal. His arm was thrown over my waist, his breath warm against the back of my neck. It was quiet, still. Like the universe had paused just long enough for this moment to stretch out and settle. For once, I didn't wake up in a rush. No alarms, no texts. Just him. And for a few blissful seconds, I didn't worry about what came next. But then he stirred, and I felt the shift. He pulled away slightly, not in a dramatic way, just enough to say, "The moment's over." I rolled onto my back and looked at him. His eyes were open, staring at the ceiling like it might give him answers. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, then shrugged. "Yeah, just thinking." "About?" He turned his head toward me. "About whether this is gonna ruin everything." My chest tightened. "You mean with Eli?" "With Eli. With you. With me." I sat up, letting the blanket fall to my waist. "It doesn't have to ruin anything." Nate pushed himself up, back against the headboard. But it could. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He wasn't freaking out. He was scared. Vulnerable in a way I wasn't used to seeing. Nate, I said, whatever this is, it's not a mistake. I'm not asking you to come out. I'm not asking for some grand declaration. But if you want this, if you want me, then I'm in. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. I do. We stayed in his room for most of the morning, just talking. Real stuff. Dumb stuff. Deep stuff. It was the first time I felt like I was really with him, not just hooking up or hiding. But the clock kept ticking, and eventually, reality caught up. Eli texted, "Be home in 20 you? Still there?" My heart jumped. Nate saw the look on my face and pulled out his own phone. He sighed. "We should probably figure out what we're doing." "Yeah," I said. "At least for now." He nodded. "Let's just keep it between us, until we know what this is." I hated the idea of hiding it. But I got it. I really did. So I grabbed my stuff, gave him one last look before heading for the door. "See you soon?" I asked. He smiled. "Definitely." I slipped out just minutes before Eli walked in. My heart was racing the entire time, but I made it. Barely. And as I stepped into the quiet afternoon sun, I couldn't help but think, whatever this is, it's real. And it's just getting started. The weeks that followed were a mess, in the best way. Nate and I were in this strange rhythm, secret texts during class, quick hellos that lasted too long, nights when I'd swing by to study with Eli but end up sneaking off to Nate's room after everyone else crashed. We kept it quiet, careful, but it wasn't sustainable. Eli wasn't stupid. He started noticing things, like how often I came over, how Nate and I never seemed to be in the same room for long, how we avoided eye contact when we were. It all came to a head one Sunday afternoon. I'd just come out of the bathroom when I saw Eli in the kitchen, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "You got a second?" he asked. I froze. "Yeah, sure." He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't want the answer to. "You and Nate," he finally said. "Is something going on?" The silence that followed felt endless. I could have lied, could have played dumb, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to pretend it wasn't real, so I nodded. Eli blinked, like he hadn't actually expected me to admit it. "For how long?" "A few weeks," I said quietly. "It wasn't planned. It just happened." He rubbed a hand down his face, pacing a few steps. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't know how you'd react." He stared at me. Then he said, "He's my brother, Dylan." "I know, and you're my best friend." "I know," I repeated, heart pounding. He was quiet for a long time. Then finally, he sighed. "Is he happy?" The question caught me off guard. "What? Does he look like he's being himself around you? Like he's not pretending anymore?" I blinked. "Yeah, he does." Eli nodded slowly. Then, that's all I needed to know. Relief hit me so hard my knees almost gave out. "You're okay with it?" I asked. He shrugged. "I didn't say that. It's weird. It's so weird. But if he's happy, and you're not just messing around, I'll get over it." That night I told Nate. He looked at me like I'd just handed him the moon. No yelling, no threats. Nope, just some heavy sighs and mild disappointment. Nate laughed, pulled me into a hug. "That's actually kind of perfect." From then on, we stopped hiding. We weren't loud about it. We didn't post pictures or announce it to the world. But we didn't lie anymore either. And being able to hold his hand on the walk back from class or kiss him goodnight without checking if Eli was in the next room, that meant everything. We took our time, learned each other's weird habits, got comfortable. And one night, months later, while we were curled up on his bed, binge-watching garbage TV, Nate looked over at me and said, "You know, I didn't think I'd ever get to have this." I smiled and laced my fingers through his. "Yeah," I said. "Me neither."